It is early morning on the northwestern shore of the Lake of Gennesaret. The air still carries the cold of the night before, thin and sharp against the skin, and the water at the edge of the shoreline is barely moving. The fishing nets are heavy. The boats have already been pulled in, and the men who work through the dark hours are crouched on the pebbled shore, their hands still stiff from the ropes, rinsing the last of the night's work from their nets in silence. And in this moment, walking toward those men along the water's edge is Jesus. He is about to say two words to one man in particular. Two words in Aramaic that you have read 100 times, perhaps without ever pausing to feel their full weight. Two words that landed on that particular man in that particular morning, after that particular night, and changed the entire direction of his life before the sun had finished rising over the eastern hills. Here's the question that will stay with you through this whole conversation. Why, Simon? Why those two words in that place at that hour? Because the answer to that question is not what most of us assume. And when you see what the original scene really looked like, something in the way you walk into your own day might quietly shift. If you are sitting with this channel this morning, take a moment before we go further and leave your city or your state in the comments below. Let this be a gathering place. Let us see, across this Tuesday morning or whatever morning it is where you are, who is beginning the day here by the shore of this lake with Jesus before the noise of the day begins. The lake that the Gospel of Luke calls the Lake of Gennesaret is the same body of water the Gospel of Mark calls the Sea of Galilee. First century Jews used both names, and the Greek gospel writers used them almost interchangeably. What matters for you to see this morning is what it actually looked like. It sits roughly 200 meters below sea level, nestled between hills on the eastern and western banks, about 13 miles long and 8 miles wide at its broadest point. The water is fresh water, fed from the north by the Jordan River as it descends from the slopes of Mount Hermon. And in the first century, the northwestern shore was busy. There were towns close together along that shoreline: Capernaum, Bethsaida, Magdala, fishing villages, boat builders, salt traders. The lake was not a lonely, romantic place. It was a working body of water, and the men who fished it were working men, rough from the cold and the ropes and the long nights on the open water. Simon, whose Aramaic name was Shimon, was one of those men. He was a fisherman from Bethsaida, a village on the northeastern shore, though the Gospel of Mark tells us he had a house in Capernaum, a few miles west along the same shoreline. He and his brother Andrew fished together. They had nets, boats, almost certainly a small business with hired hands, because the Gospel of Mark mentions hired workers in connection with their neighbor Zebedee's operation. Simon was not a poor wanderer. He was a tradesman. He knew this lake the way a carpenter knows his wood, the way a stonemason knows the weight of limestone in his hands. And on this particular morning, Simon had nothing to show for the night. Luke's gospel is precise about this detail in a way that the English often softens. The Greek text says they had worked through the whole night, diaholes, nuktos, and caught nothing. Nothing. Not a slow night, not a modest catch, nothing at all. Any fisherman reading those words understood exactly what that meant. It meant wasted time, wasted labor, wasted fuel for the lamps, sore muscles, and the particular quiet discouragement of coming back to shore empty-handed and having to begin the day anyway. Here is what the geography of this place makes clearer than the text alone does. The northwestern shore near Capernaum has a slightly curved natural bay, and the hills behind it create an effect where sound travels across the water with unusual clarity. Scholars of the region have noted that a teacher standing at the water's edge in one of those small inlets could project a voice across the surface of the lake and be heard by a considerable crowd without effort. The text tells us that a crowd had gathered that morning to hear Jesus teach. And Jesus, seeing Simon's empty boat beached at the shore, stepped into it and asked Simon to push out a little from the land, just a little, so that he could teach from the boat, using the water as a natural amphitheater. And Simon, tired, quiet, empty-handed, did it. He pushed the boat out. He sat in it and listened. He did not leave. He did not make an excuse. After a night of nothing, He stayed and let a teacher from Nazareth use his boat as a pulpit. This is the part of the scene that most readers move past without pausing. Simon was already in posture of service before Jesus said a single word to him personally. He had given his boat, he had given his morning. He was not looking for a spiritual experience. He was just a tired fisherman doing a tired fisherman's courtesy for a teacher he had apparently encountered before. When Jesus had finished speaking to the crowd, he turned to Simon, and what he said was not a sermon. It was not a theological statement. It was a very specific instruction about fish. He said, in the Greek of Luke's gospel, epanagage, eyes to bathos, put out into the deep, go to the deep water, and let down your nets for a catch. Now here is where the scene becomes something more than a miracle story, because Simon's response to that instruction is one of the most honest sentences any disciple speaks in any of the four gospels. The text records it with complete precision. Simon answered and said, Master, we have worked all night long and have caught nothing. We, all night, nothing. He was not rude. He was not dismissive. He was stating the fact of the situation with the authority of a man who had been fishing this lake since he was young enough to hold a net. He knew where the fish were. He knew what the night had produced. He knew that the deep water in the middle of the day, when the sun was climbing and the fish had gone down to the cold dark below, was not where you found a catch. And then Simon said something that most of us pass over far too quickly. He said, yet because you say so, I will let down the nets. Not because it makes sense, not because I believe it will work, because you say so. That word yet sits in the center of the whole scene like a hinge. The Greek word is epidetorematiso, which translates literally as upon your word, upon the word that you speak, not upon my experience, not upon my knowledge of this lake, upon what you have said to me. And the nets filled, the text says they filled so completely that the nets were tearing from the weight. They had to signal to the other boat to come and help. Both boats were so full they began to sink. The same man who had returned empty from the deep water an hour before was now knee-deep in fish in a boat that could barely hold the catch. And here is where the morning turns completely. Because Simon Peter's response is not what you might expect from someone who just witnessed something extraordinary. He did not shout. He did not celebrate. The Gospel of Luke says he fell at Jesus' knees and said, Depart from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man. Sit with that for a moment. The weight of that. A man surrounded by the impossible abundance of a catch he had not earned, falling to his knees, not in gratitude, but in something closer to terror. Not terror of the fish, terror of his own smallness in front of something real. The abundance did not make Simon feel worthy. It made him feel seen. And being fully seen by something holy was more than he had prepared for that morning when he pushed his empty boat out from the shore. This is the moment everything in this conversation turned, because what Jesus said next was not what anyone in that boat expected to hear. Jesus looked at Simon, this tired, honest, frightened fisherman on his knees among all those fish, and said, Do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching people. If you haven't paused to subscribe to this channel yet, this is a quiet moment to do it. Every morning we sit with one teaching of Jesus, one real scene from the gospel, one word to carry into the day. No sermons, no formulas, just the text, the place, and what he actually said. 3 words in the Greek carry the weight of that sentence in a way the English almost misses. The phrase translated as catching people is the Greek word zogron, which does not simply mean to catch the way you catch a fish for a meal. The root of the word is zoos, meaning alive, living. Zogron means to take alive, to capture living, to bring in without destroying. The same word appears in the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures to describe what happens when a soldier takes prisoners of war alive instead of killing them. It carries within it the idea of preserving life, not ending it. Jesus was not telling Simon that he would drag people into a net the way you drag a fish from the water to die. He was telling him that his life's work from this point forward would be to take people alive, to bring them towards something living, to gather the ones who are drowning and bring them up into the air. That image is not accidental. It is chosen from the very air of the lake that surrounded them, crafted precisely for the man who spent his life on its water. And the text tells us something else. When Jesus said, "Do not be afraid," the Greek word is me phobo, stop being afraid. It is present tense. The fear was already there. Jesus saw it. He did not correct it. He did not explain why there was nothing to fear. He simply met Simon in the middle of his fear and named it. And then he named what Simon would become. Here's the question worth carrying into the rest of your morning. What was the fear actually about? Simon said he was a sinful man. The Greek is aner hamartolos, a man of sin. He was not confessing a specific sin. He was confessing a condition. He was saying, I am the kind of person who should not be standing this close to whatever you are. And the quiet truth that the scene holds, if you are willing to sit with it, is that Jesus did not disagree with Simon's self-assessment. He did not say, no, you are fine, you are a good man. He said, stop being afraid, which is a different and more honest answer. It acknowledged the weight of what Simon had said and moved forward through it rather than around it. This is the kind of thing Jesus says to people who are honest about what they are. Not to people who are performing devotion, not to people who arrive with credentials, but to people who are on their knees in a boat full of fish at the end of a hard night, saying, I am not what I should be to be near you. The scene closes quietly. The boats came to shore, and Luke says they left everything and followed him. After the empty night, after the impossible catch, after the fear and the word spoken through the fear, they just came to shore, walked away from the boats and the fish and the nets, and followed. They did not ask where they were going. They did not negotiate. They did not finish the day. And think about it. This is the moment to close the question that was opened at the very beginning of this morning. Why, Simon? Why those two words? Follow me in that place at that hour. Because Simon had already been following in the only way he knew how. He had given his boat. He had pushed out into the water at the word of someone he did not fully understand. He had cast the nets when everything in him said not to. He had stayed when he could have gone home. Before Jesus said, follow me, Simon had already been practicing exactly what those words would ask of him. Movement at the word of another, even when it does not make sense, even when the night has been long and empty, even when the deep water looks unpromising from the shore. And here is what that means for the day you are about to begin. You are not Simon Peter in the moment of his greatest faith. You may be Simon Peter in the moment before the catch, crouched at the shoreline with your hands still stiff from a long night, with nets that came back empty, with a morning that has asked something of you before you were ready to give it. That is where Jesus walked toward him. Not after the miracle, into the empty, tired, honest middle of an ordinary fishing morning. The two words he spoke did not ask Simon to be ready. They did not ask him to be worthy. They did not ask him to feel capable. They asked him to move, to get up from the nets, to walk, to follow the direction of a voice that had already proven it knew where the fish were in waters. Simon thought he knew better than anyone. Whatever today asks of you before noon, you can bring this word with you, not as a formula, not as a motivation slogan, as the memory of a specific morning on a real shoreline when a real man heard two words from a real voice and got up from the empty nets and walked. Before we close this morning, leave a comment below and share which moment from this scene is going with you into the day. Was it Simon's honesty on his knees? Was it the word zogron, taking people alive? Was it the phrase upon your word? Was it simply the image of a tired fisherman who got up anyway? Share it below. And if this quiet morning by the lake meant something to you, give it a like and share it with someone you love who could use a word from Jesus before they step into their day. Let's pray together before you go. Father, this morning we come to the shore of Gennesaret the same way Simon came to it, a little tired, carrying whatever the night left in our hands, not always sure we have what the day requires. We have heard the same two words he heard. We have heard them across all the years and all the miles between that shoreline and this morning. Help us to do what Simon did, not perfectly, not without fear, but honestly, at your word. Send us into the deep of this day. with our nets open, and bring us back to shore with whatever you choose to fill them with. In your name, amen. Go gently into your day. He is already ahead of you.